The smell of fresh concrete and betrayal has a very particular scent. Trust me, I've been breathing it for 6 months. They built 15 commercial buildings worth $40 million on my land, while I sipped morning coffee and counted every nail. They hammered into their own coffin. Right now, Veronica Blackwood is standing 50 yards from my kitchen window, posing for news cameras in front of her grand achievement. The sharp click of her designer heels echoing off the asphalt that buried my wife Sarah's prized tomato garden. This woman, HOA president and part-time Satan, thought she'd found the perfect victim. Grieving widower, simple electrician, probably too stupid to read the fine print. She spent 18 months weaving legal webs and greasing city hall palms to steal what wasn't hers. But that rusty lockbox on my counter holds papers older than her great-grandmother. And I'm about to turn her million-dollar victory parade into the most expensive property law lesson Colorado has ever witnessed. What would you do if they stole your land? Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I bet your HOA has tried something shady, too. Let me tell you how I got here, because nobody wakes up one day and finds themselves in a war with their neighborhood's self-appointed dictator. My name's Garrett Mills, and this 40-acre piece of Colorado prairie has been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather bought it in 1987 with his life savings. Dirt cheap because nobody wanted farmland that smelled like cattle and sounded like coyotes. Just rolling grassland, a modest farmhouse with floorboards that seek out Morse code when you walk, and a red barn that leans like it's tired of standing up straight. Sarah and I raised chickens here, grew tomatoes that actually tasted like sunshine, and watched sunsets that had make an atheist reconsider. Every morning, I'd wake to the sound of our rooster Earl, named after my father-in-law because both were loud, obnoxious, and impossible to ignore. Sarah died 3 years ago. Cancer, the kind that gives you false hope before gut-punching you back to reality. Those last months, she handled all our paperwork because my hands shake when I'm stressed. And legal documents make about as much sense to me as quantum physics. I'm an electrician. Give me tangled wires and I'll sort them out. Give me contracts and I might as well be reading ancient Sumerian. After Sarah passed, the silence got heavier than lead. I kept her morning routine. Feed chickens at dawn. Tend the vegetable garden she planted with military precision. Sit on the porch swing that still smells faintly of her lavender hand lotion. The coffee pot still makes enough for 2 because hope dies harder than habits. Meanwhile, our slice of nowhere was getting swallowed by suburban sprawl. Heritage Oaks subdivisions sprouted around my property like expensive weeds. McMansions with 3-car garages and lawns so artificially green they'd make a golf course jealous. Property taxes jumped 400% faster than my pension could handle. These new neighbors formed an HOA when their subdivision incorporated. And somehow my land got grandfathered into their rules even though I'm technically outside their kingdom. Enter Veronica Blackwood, the woman who probably irons her yoga pants and schedules her bathroom breaks. 45 drives a white Tesla she parks sideways to claim maximum territory and carries herself like she invented oxygen. Real estate attorney by day, HOA dictator by choice, married to City Councilman Bradley Blackwood, a political connection more valuable than gold when you need permits rubber-stamped or regulations bent into pretzels. She appeared at my door last spring wearing a smile sharper than barbed wire and perfume expensive enough to fund a small country. Said she needed my signature on routine paperwork for a utility easement update. Just infrastructure improvements. Nothing that would disturb my rustic lifestyle. The documents looked official. County. Letterhead. Enough legal jargon to choke a lawyer. Here's a lesson that cost me everything. Never sign documents while you're grieving. Predators can smell vulnerability from 3 counties away. Always get independent legal review, even for routine paperwork. I should have called a lawyer. Should have done what Sarah always did when someone wanted signatures. Instead, I signed, listening to that pen scratch across paper like fingernails on a coffin lid. 48 hours later, surveyors invaded my land with GPS equipment and orange stakes, marking territory like wolves. They planted flags across Sarah's vegetable garden, around my chicken coop, even next to Earl's favorite dust bath. When I asked what was happening, the crew chief, decent guy named Danny, winced. Lady with the Tesla says this is all HOA property now. I drove straight to the county clerk's office, where the air tastes like old paper and broken dreams under fluorescent lights that hum. Funeral doors. 3 hours of digging through records revealed Veronica's master plan. That routine easement transferred development rights to 35 of my 40 acres. Bradley had pre-approved zoning changes, reclassifying my agricultural land as mixed-use commercial. The HOA could now seize any unused property within their expanded boundaries for community benefit. I'd been outplayed by a professional chess player while I was still learning checkers, and judging by the construction equipment arriving that afternoon, she was ready for her victory lap. The construction equipment arrived like an invasion force. Diesel monsters belching black smoke across what used to be Sarah's wildflower meadow. I woke up that Thursday to the beep, beep, beep of a backhoe reversing over the exact spot where Sarah and I had our first kiss 30 years ago. The sound of progress. Veronica would probably call it. To me, it sounded like grave digging. By 6 a.m., a full surveying crew had spread across my land like ants on a dropped ice cream cone. Orange stakes sprouted everywhere through my vegetable garden, around the chicken coop where Earl held court, even next to the old oak tree where Sarah used to read on summer afternoons. The crew chief, Danny, looked apologetic as hell, but orders were orders. Then she arrived. Veronica pulled up in her Range Rover. Apparently, the Tesla wasn't rugged enough for actual dirt. Wearing designer jeans that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, she strode across my property with architectural drawings tucked under her arm like she was Moses carrying down commandments, her expensive boots crunching through the frost-covered grass. "Mr. Mills," she called out, her voice carrying that particular tone rich people use when they're pretending to be reasonable. "You'll need to relocate your agricultural activities to the designated 5-acre homestead zone." She pointed to a patch of land that included my house, the immediate yard, and about enough space to grow a decent tomato plant. Everything else, the barn, the pasture where I'd planned to get a couple of horses someday, Sarah's carefully planned herb garden that still smelled like rosemary and thyme, all of it was apparently theirs now. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest like steam in a pressure cooker. "I think there's been some confusion about property lines." She smiled that patronizing smile people practice in mirrors. "Mr. Mills, I understand change can be difficult, but this development will bring significant value to the entire community. Your property values will increase substantially." Property values. Because that's what matters when someone's bulldozing your wife's memorial garden. That night, I did something I hadn't done since high school geometry class. I studied spread those survey maps across my kitchen table next to Sarah's reading glasses, measuring distances with a ruler and comparing them to my original 1987 deed. The smell of instant coffee and growing suspicion filled the air as I worked by lamplight. And that's when I found it. Their survey was wrong. Not just a little wrong, spectacularly, legally impossibly wrong. Those orange stakes weren't just marking my property. They had included a 1/4 acre of my neighbor's land, including Ezra Kowalski's fishing pond. I remembered what my electrician instructor used to say about building permits. Measure twice, cut once, because one mistake invalidates everything. Apparently, the same rule applied to property surveys. Ezra is a retired Marine who moved here 5 years back for the quiet and the fishing. Guy's built like a refrigerator and has the kind of calm that comes from seeing real combat. If Veronica thought she could intimidate a man who'd survived 3 tours in Afghanistan, she was about to get schooled. Friday morning, Ezra and I struck back. We met at dawn with bright pink surveyor's tape, metal stakes, and my original deed, following the property lines exactly as described in the legal documents, not Veronica's fantasy version. We marked the true boundaries. Then we set up folding chairs right on the corrected property line with a cooler full of coffee and the kind of determination that only comes from being royally pissed off. The construction crew arrived for another day of trespassing to find 2 men sitting calmly in their path, steam rising from our coffee cups in the morning chill. Danny, the crew chief, scratched his head and made some phone calls. 10 minutes later, Veronica's Range Rover came tearing down the dirt road, kicking up dust clouds. That settled on everything like guilt. You cannot interfere with a legal survey, she shrieked, climbing out in yoga pants and Ugg boots. Apparently, she'd been interrupted during her morning meditation or whatever rich people do at dawn. Ezra, deadpan as week-old bread, looked up from his thermos. Ma'am, last I checked, sitting on your own property wasn't illegal in America. This is HOA property now. You're trespassing. I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 52 years, but also feeling something I hadn't experienced in months. The satisfaction of being absolutely legally right. Actually, Veronica, your survey crew, made a significant error. I pointed to where their stakes had claimed Ezra's pond, the morning sun glinting off the water that clearly sat on his side of the fence. See that water? That's on Mr. Kowalski's deed, not yours, which means your entire survey is worthless. Her face went through several interesting color changes, pink to red to something approaching eggplant purple. The sound of her grinding teeth was audible over the idling construction equipment. I'm calling the police, she declared, pulling out her phone like it was a loaded weapon. Please do, I replied, settling back into my folding chair. I'd love to show Deputy Martinez my deed versus your fantasy map. 20 minutes later, Deputy Sheriff Martinez, same guy who'd helped me with a drunk driver last year, examined both sets of markers and confirmed what I already knew. My property lines were correct, according to county records. The survey crew packed up their equipment, muttering about conflicting information and needing lawyers to sort this mess out. Veronica retreated to her Range Rover, but not before taking photos of everything with her phone, the camera clicking like an angry insect. As she drove away, tires spinning in the gravel and leaving ruts that would take weeks to heal. I knew this was just round one. That evening, a certified letter arrived. Notice of HOA violation. Unauthorized property markers, fine. $500 for vandalism of community survey equipment. Ezra read it over my shoulder and chuckled, the sound rumbling up from his chest like distant thunder. She's testing you, brother. Question is, how far are you willing to let her go? I looked out at those pink stakes marking what was mine. Thought about Sarah's garden buried under those orange flags and made a decision that would change everything. As far as it takes, Ezra. As far as it takes. The certified letters started arriving like clockwork, one every 3 days, each more ridiculous than the last. Violation notice, grass height, exceeds community standards. Apparently, my lawn was 2 in 2 tall in the back corner where nobody but satellites could see it. Fine. $200. Violation notice. Unsightly agricultural structure. They meant my chicken coop, which had been standing since before their subdivision was even a developer's wet dream. Fine. $300. Violation notice. Unlicensed commercial activity. This one made me laugh out loud. They were calling my little roadside vegetable stand an illegal business. The same stand where Sarah used to sell tomatoes for 50 cents a pound to help pay for her cancer treatments. Fine. $500. Each letter arrived with the ceremonial pump of certified mail requiring my signature like I was signing my own execution warrant. The mailman, old Pete Rodriguez, started giving me sympathetic looks. Another one, Garrett? He'd say, shaking his head. These people got nothing better to do. The total damage, $3,400. In fines with a threat to place a lien on my property if I didn't pay within 30 days. I discovered their secret weapon when I called the HOA attorney's office. Turns out the lawyer handling my case was Veronica's former law school roommate. Funny how these coincidences work out when you're the one orchestrating them. But while Veronica was playing games with certified mail, I was doing real homework. The Millbrook Heights City Hall smells like old paper and broken promises with fluorescent lights that buzz like dying insects. I spent 3 days there digging through public records with the determination of an archaeologist hunting treasure. My back ached from hunching over filing cabinets, and my eyes burned from reading microfilm until the words blurred together. What I found was better than gold. The HOA had filed for something called special district status, basically legal superpowers that let them tax residents and enforce regulations like a mini-government. I remembered Sarah once telling me about a contractor who tried to overcharge us for electrical work. Always check their credentials, Garrett. Scammers count on people not asking the right questions. Same principle applied here. Colorado. Law requires 60% resident approval for special district designation. The HOA claimed 100% approval from all residents, but they never notified me or 3 other original land owners who predated their subdivision. When I cross-referenced the notification requirements with the actual notices sent, the HOA had held their formation meeting on a Tuesday at 2:00 p.m. Perfect timing if you want to exclude anyone who works for a living. I found myself a lawyer, Meredith Cruz, fresh out of law school and working at the legal aid office. Downtown, 26 years old, drowning in student loans, and hungry enough to take on a case that bigger firms would run from. Her office smelled like burnt coffee and stress sweat with law books, held together by duct tape and pure determination. "This is better than any case study they gave us in law school," she said, spreading the documents across her cluttered desk like a general planning battle strategy. They screwed up the formation process 6 ways from Sunday. We filed a formal challenge to the HOA's special district status with the Colorado Secretary of State, demanding an audit of their formation documents. Meredith worked nights and weekends surviving on energy drinks and righteous indignation, her fingers flying across her laptop keyboard like a pianist performing a concert. But Veronica wasn't going quietly. She hired a private security company called Sentinel Solutions. Basically, rent-a-cops with delusions of grandeur. They started patrolling the neighborhood in white SUVs with enough light bars to land aircraft, conducting wellness checks on my property twice daily. The head guard, Miguel, would apologize quietly while taking photos of my property. "Ladies paying us overtime to document anything that might be a violation," he whispered during one of these theatrical inspections, the sound of his camera clicking like an angry cricket. "Sorry, man. Bills are bills." They photographed everything. My mailbox, angle, garden hose placement, even the precise location of Earl's favorite dust bath. Every picture became evidence in another violation notice, another fine, another attempt to bleed me dry through legal paper cuts. The neighborhood split, like a wishbone under pressure. Working families and retirees, people who remembered when this was farm country, started showing quiet support. They'd wave from their driveways or leave anonymous notes tucked under my windshield wipers. But the new money crowd lined up behind Veronica like soldiers following orders to war. Then, Meredith called with news that changed the game. "Garrett, I found something huge," she said, her voice electric with excitement. Colorado Statute 38-33.3-209. HOAs cannot enforce regulations on property that exists outside their legal boundaries. Even with your easement, your homestead remains outside their jurisdiction. I stopped paying their fines. Every certified letter got returned with refused stamped across it in red ink. Every violation notice went straight into the trash, unopened. The sound of paper hitting the bottom satisfying as a perfect golf swing. Veronica's response was swift and nuclear. An emergency HOA board meeting to discuss the problem resident situation. The meeting notice was posted only on the subdivision entrance sign where I'd never see it unless I was specifically looking. But Ezra was always looking. Military guys develop networks like spider webs, invisible until you walk into them. 3 days later, the certified letter that arrived wasn't another violation notice. It was a formal notice of eminent domain proceedings. The HOA board had voted for 1 to seize my remaining 35 acres for essential community infrastructure. The proposed compensation, $50,000 for land worth at least $400,000. Ezra read it over my shoulder and whistled low, the sound cutting through the morning air like a blade. "Well, brother, looks like she just went from stupid to felony-level stupid. You ready to show her what a real fight looks like?" I folded the letter carefully, feeling the weight of what was coming, and smiled for the first time in weeks. "Ezra, I think it's time to remind Miss Blackwood that some ropes are actually newies." The eminent domain paperwork read like a ransom note dressed up in legal language. Notice of intent to acquire private property for community benefit, it proclaimed in bold letters, as if capitalizing the words made the theft more legitimate. The HOA board, all 4 members who'd voted yes, claimed my 35 acres were needed for Essential community infrastructure, a community center, expanded parking, and something called a commercial pavilion. For resident services, $50,000. That's what they offered for land that any decent appraiser would value at 10 times that amount. The smell of fresh ink on the documents mixed with my morning coffee and the lingering scent of Earl's breakfast scraps, creating an aroma I'd forever associate with legalized robbery. But something about their language bothered me like a splinter under the skin. Commercial pavilions sounded awfully fancy for a community center. So I did what any suspicious electrician would do. I went digging for the real story. The county recorder's office keeps public records of all land transactions and development agreements. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, like angry wasps as I spent 4 hours searching through files that smelled like dust and forgotten dreams. My fingers grew black with ink from old carbon copies, but I struck gold in a folder marked pending commercial. Development applications, purchase agreements, 3 of them. Veronica's real estate company had contracts with a major pharmacy chain, a coffee franchise, and something called Heritage Marketplace LLC. The community center was actually a planned strip mall, and those retail tenants were prepared to pay premium rent for prime location access. Sarah always said that when someone lies to your face, they usually tell the truth somewhere else. The scratching of my pen as I copied down the contract details sounded like her saying, "I told you so." From beyond the grave, I remembered reading about a Supreme Court case in Connecticut. Some grandmother who lost her house so a developer could build condos. After that, most states passed laws protecting property owners from exactly this kind of corporate theft. Colorado's version was crystal clear. No eminent domain for private commercial benefit. Period. When I called Meredith with my discovery, the excitement in her voice crackled through the phone like electricity through copper wire. "Garrett, this is smoking gun evidence. We can get an injunction filed by tomorrow morning." But I had a different idea. Sometimes the best way to catch a thief is to let them steal something worthless while you're watching. "Let's hold off on the injunction for now," I told her, watching a red-tailed hawk circle over what used to be Sarah's sunflower field. "I want to see how deep this rabbit hole goes." The next morning brought another surprise. A white pickup truck parked in my driveway with Environmental Solutions ink painted on the doors. A guy in a polo shirt and clipboard approached my front porch, his expensive boots crunching on the gravel. Sarah and I had laid ourselves 15 years ago, each stone chosen for how it caught the morning light. "Mr. Mills, I'm here to conduct a routine environmental assessment of your septic system. HOA regulation requires periodic groundwater testing in rural properties." I'd been an electrician for 30 years. When someone shows up unannounced, claiming routine anything, it's usually routine, but I let him do his testing, watching as he collected soil samples with the precision of a crime scene investigator. The whole process felt theater-like, performed for an audience of one. 3 days later, another certified letter arrived with the weight of bad news. Environmental hazard notice. Elevated nitrate levels detected. According to their report, my septic system was contaminating groundwater and posed a public health risk. The solution? Immediate connection to city sewer lines at my expense. Estimated cost, $15,000. The paper felt expensive between my fingers. The kind of stock that costs extra to make lies look official. I hired my own environmental testing company, a local outfit run by Carl Henderson, who'd been testing well water since before environmental consulting became a growth industry. Carl showed up in coveralls that actually had dirt on them, driving a truck that looked like it had seen real work. His results showed normal nitrate levels well within EPA guidelines. When we compared the GPS coordinates, we discovered something interesting. Their contaminated samples had been taken from a spot 50 yards away from my actual septic system, right next to where my neighbor's Great Dane liked to conduct his daily constitutional. Manufacturing evidence is a federal crime. Falsifying environmental reports can cost you your license and land you in prison, but apparently Veronica was feeling desperate enough to play with fire and gasoline. At the next HOA meeting, this one properly noticed